appreciate your coming today too. As cold as it is and as miserable as it's been, we appreciate you coming here. And just a few things I want to mention about Jeff. I could probably write a book about this guy, but I recall when he interviewed here, his interview I believe was scheduled for 8 o'clock in the morning, and he was here at 7:15 in the morning. And that was very impressive with some of us because we believe in being on time, and he certainly was. His student teaching experience was at Altoona, but he didn't know that Fuzzy Thurston didn't play football at Altoona. Altoona didn't have a football team at that particular time. But I think the thing to keep in mind with this guy is that I can safely say he's in the top 3% of all teachers as far as quality of teaching and as far as an individual. Jeff, the podium is yours.
And again, some of you heard the story before, but I have to add a little bit more to the Altoona story, to the interview. When I interviewed in Prescott, first interview ever for a teaching position. And the first question that Mr. Lehman asked me was, who is the most famous person ever to graduate from Altoona High School? You know, that was the first question. So you spend all this teacher preparatory time working on what your philosophy is, you know, how to answer questions like, why do you want to teach here? What do you hope to accomplish as a teacher, so on and so forth. And the first question I get is, who's the most famous person to graduate from Altoona High School? And the first of all, I was thrown for a loop, and then I thought, maybe it's Mr. Lehman. Maybe Mr. Lehman is. And I almost said that, but I kind of chickened out because I thought maybe that would be identified as being kind of a smart aleck. So I said I didn't know. And he said, what? You don't know? I said, no, I don't know. He said, you got to be kidding me. He said, you mean to tell me you spent an entire semester teaching at Altoona High School and you don't know who the most famous person ever to graduate from Altoona High School is? I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't. And then he said, well, Fuzzy Thurston. And then I went, oh. I said, I did know that. I did know that. Which I did. I did know that, but I'm not a Packer fan. Then there was a kind of a pregnant pause. He said, what? I said, I'm not a Packer fan. Takes out my resume and says, you grew up in Frederick, Wisconsin. You went to school at UW Eau Claire. You've lived in Wisconsin your entire life, and you're not a Packer fan? I said, no, I'm not. And he said, don't tell me you're a Minnesota Viking fan. And I said, yes, I am. And he kind of leans back, does not have a smile on his face, like he does right now. Doesn't have a smile on his face. He kind of leans back and says, you've blown this interview. Literally what he said, and I kind of sat there. And I remember starting to get up, and I was ready to leave, and he said, no, sit down. And then I don't remember anything after that. So there's more to that story than just a tiny tidbit that he shared. Okay, when Mr. Lehman called and asked me to share a few thoughts about being lucky enough to be inducted into the WBCA Hall of Fame, I didn't really know how to respond to that. I thought, well, the perfect thing to do was to talk about my upbringing, to talk about where that interest in baseball came from. And there's so many people involved. And I'll do my best to get through this as I talk about primarily family and how much our connection to the sport of baseball and athletics in general has kind of been a major part of my life, personally and professionally. But first, What I want you to do, that slip of paper you have in front of you, please turn it over. Okay, anybody want to tell me what do you see?
The alphabet?
The alphabet.
I see probably what you saw when you were going to stand up and leave the room from Carol Lambert.
Yeah, the alphabet. I see that, but it's not what I see first. Okay? Now this is really going to sound strange. And I was talking with my brother John, my brother Greg, my brother Tim about speaking today and then next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend down in Madison. And I was kind of asking for some advice about some of the thoughts I'm going to share down in Madison. And I was saying, oh, this would be kind of a good thing to talk about. When I see this list, I see baseball players. And I want to explain it to you. Now, I grew up, there were 6 of us. Okay? 5 brothers, no sisters. I have a twin brother. He's the smart twin. I'm the dumb jock. And I had 4 older brothers. My oldest brother, Stuart, had Down syndrome. He passed away in 1995, very important person. A lot of you have heard me talk before, know how important he was to me and to our family. Then I have a brother, Tim, John, and Greg, all older. We were, me and my brother Joel, younger twin brother, we were 8 years separated from Greg. So when we were growing up, we kind of idolized, literally, our older brothers. And when I was growing up, one of the things that I and my brother Joel became aware of was my brothers, especially John and Tim, how they had a very, very creative mind. And they had make-up baseball teams, make-up baseball leagues, make-up basketball leagues, make-up football leagues. In the fall, you played football. In the winter and spring, you played basketball. In the spring and summer, you played baseball. You didn't play baseball during the winter. You didn't intermix. It was that season. And my brothers had all these make-up leagues. It was really, really impressive. And I have told my brothers that, Dad, there's a, speaking of a book, there's a book in there someplace. And these were 3 made-up players, okay, that I grew up with. Okay, this first one, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Now these make-up players not only had unique names, but of course they all had unique batting stances. Okay? And if you had 9 players, I'm a right-handed hitter, so 5 could bat right-handed, and then 4 had to bat left-handed. So of course you picked the best players, me anyway, to bat right-handed. But that was kind of the rule. You couldn't all just hit one way. But these are 3 of my favorites. First one, his name is Absadefka. Okay? Absadefka. Okay? And I brought a bat because I want to. This is literally when we used to pitch to each other how these guys had to bat. It was like a rule. Okay? This is from my brothers. If Marsha's the pitcher, Absadefka batted like this. He batted like this. Literally, and he couldn't move his feet. So he had a very difficult time hitting the ball fair. Absadefka. He swung, he couldn't step, he swung like this. Okay? That's Absadefka. The next guy, his brother, Ijkol Manat. Ijkol Manat batted like this. Okay? The opposite of his brother, Absadefka. Then the only normal one was their cousin, Kirst Uvwicks. And Kirst Uvwicks batted normal. Okay? So, when I see that, I think baseball players. And I think of the unbelievable imagination that my brothers had without the internet. And without social media to jog their mind, just using their mind. A couple other players. Cripe Olson. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that name in the Prescott Journal before. This was a league rule. This is my brother Greg's made-up name. Cripe Olson, a catcher, who when he swung, he closed his eyes. When he swung, he closed his eyes. And the league rule was, since, he was a very good defensive catcher though, that's why he always played. But when he swung, the pitcher had to tell him when to swing. That was the league rule. And if Cripe Olson happened to hit the ball in the air, it was like an automatic home run. Cripe Olson, okay? But the one player I probably hated more than anybody else was this guy, Yates Amatitio. I hated him because when I would pitch, Yates Amatitio used to choke way up. And all he would do, he'd hit a ground ball, it was an automatic base hit because he was so fast. That's all he did. I hated pitching against him. Yates Amatitio. Okay, so when I think of baseball and growing up, I always think of my brothers all the time. Perhaps the one I think of more than anybody is my oldest brother, Stuart, the one who passed away in 1995. Because when I was growing up, my older brothers, John and Greg, they would work like crazy trying to get, my brother Tim, he was a little bit older, so he's off to college a lot of times. They would work really, really fast to get the lawn mowed. We had a huge lawn. Used to, again, one push mower, none of this riding stuff. Dad didn't get a riding lawnmower until we all were gone, of course. And it usually took about 6 hours to mow the lawn. And after we get done mowing the lawn, after John and Greg would get done mowing, then of course we play baseball. And I can remember having bats that John and Greg would bring home from baseball practice, wooden bats that were broken. And our dad showed us, here, you can fix a bat that's broken. You can take a drill, you can drill a hole, then you can put a screw in it, and then you can tape it back up, and it'll work again. So we had about 8, 9, or 10 bats. And when we're 6 or 7 years old, you know, you're choking way up here, and when you're swinging, you're hitting yourself in the stomach when you're swinging, okay? Those are the bats we used. And I can remember being 7 or 8 years old, and we'd be playing a game out in the backyard. If you hit the barn, of course, it was a home run. Off the stump was a double. If my twin brother, who batted left-handed, it was a right-handed ballpark because everybody was right-handed. If he pulled the ball, he hit it into the pasture where the long grass was, and then we'd have to go out and lay head to toe and roll in the grass. And if you rolled in the grass and found a hump, that's either a rock or a ball. So we never really lost too many baseballs that way, but Joe wasn't a very popular guy when he'd pull the ball. So Joe always blamed his inability to pull the ball in high school on how he was not allowed to. He was always expected to go the other way, so to speak, as a left-handed hitter. But when we play a normal game, my brother Stuart didn't really like the makeup players. He liked real players. Minnesota Twins, of course, growing up with Harmon Killebrew and Tony Oliva and all those great players of the Minnesota Twins from the 1960s. And have any of you ever heard of a guy named Jerry Kindle? He's from Minnesota. Played at the University of Minnesota in the 1950s, played in the majors for 9 years, coached at the University of Arizona for a number of years, won 3 national championships. Really, really good man. Passed away, I think, last year. He came and spoke at our Wisconsin Baseball Coach Association clinic about 5, 6 years ago. And when I saw him, I said to myself, I've got to go and talk to him because I got to tell him a great story about my brother Stuart. And in the backyard, if the Twins were down, even with Tony Oliva at the plate and Stuart was up, my brothers in the ninth, if we're behind, playing the Yankees, or down 3-2, 4-3, John always pitched, Greg always played outfield. If the Twins needed a big hit, of course in the ninth, Jerry Kindle would always pinch hit. Even for Harmon Killebrew, even for Tony Oliva, Jerry Kindle would always pinch hit. And I would say more often than not, Jerry Kindle would hit a home run off the barn. And then me and my brother Joe, we go wild, go crazy because the Twins won. Because Stuart, the first home run hitter I ever knew, hit a home run. He won the game. He or Jerry Kindle won the game. And here's the story about Jerry Kindle. This is it's a great, at least I think it's a great story. In 1965, the year I was born, the Twins went to the World Series. First World Series. Played the Dodgers, they lost in 7 games. During the 1965 season, They won 100 games. Great season for the Twins. Kind of came out of nowhere. They finished 6th. That was back when there was no American League pennant or no American League Championship Series. It was whoever won the American League, the best record in the American League, played the team that had the best record in the National League. That's all it was, and they played World Series. And Game 7 was at 1 o'clock at Bloomington Stadium, at Metropolitan Stadium. Sandy Koufax beat the Twins 2-0. But during that season, the announcer for the Twins was a guy by the name of Ray Scott. And those of you who are Packer fans know that name. But Ray Scott was the play-by-play announcer for the Minnesota Twins. And the 1965 season was memorialized in an LP record called The Last of the Ninth. I'm sure some of us remember the old vinyl records, the big records. Maybe some of you still have them, still play them. But it was basically the highlights, the radio highlights of the 65 season. Okay? It's a great record. And there is a game in late summer where Jerry Kindle pinch hits for a guy by the name of Dick Stigman. Now, Dick Stigman is from Minnesota. He's actually from a little town called Nimrod, Minnesota. Okay? Dick Stigman was a pitcher. Okay? So Jerry Kindle pinch hit for Dick Stigman. It's the only time Jerry Kindle's name is on this record. Okay? Now again, we all love that record, listen to it a lot. My brother Stuart just loved the Twins, loved listening to that record. And when Ray Scott, he calls it like this, and I'm poor excuse for Ray Scott, but I can hear his call from listening to the record. And this is what Ray Scott said, literally. Jerry Kindle up the bat for Stigman. There's a long one to left. It is a tie ball game. Okay? And the Twins go on and win the game in extra innings. Okay? Now, Jerry Kindle, as far as my brother Stuart is concerned, what's the only thing that Jerry Kindle did? Hit home runs. You know how many home runs Jerry Kindle hit that year? 1. But that's the only thing Jerry Kindle did. Hit home runs. So after Jerry Kindle spoke, that Friday evening afterwards, as a coach's social, I came up to him, I said, Mr. Kindle, I've got to tell you a story. He said, okay, and I told him the story, and it was just a thrill for me to tell the story. And after I told his reaction was awesome, he started crying. He said, can I share that story? You can share that with whoever you want to share. So when we talk about me growing up, okay, that's who I am. Okay, I think about my brother, the home run hitter, my older brothers who were willing to give up a Saturday to pitch and play baseball, with their younger brothers. And as they got older, me and my twin brother, of course, we had great one-on-one games ourselves. We used tennis balls. The barn was too close, so we started to hit toward the house. Okay? Amazingly, we never broke a window. We were using tennis balls, and there'd be times we hit the house. Of course, hit the house. It's a home run. Mom would come out and let us know that we shouldn't be doing that. But when I think of baseball, I always think of my hometown, Frederick, Wisconsin. I have a great affinity for my hometown. Fortunate enough to play at the varsity level all 4 years at Frederick. Had a high school coach who was willing to put a little pipsqueak shortstop as a 9th grader, have him play shortstop, and I remember being very afraid when I played my first varsity baseball game, and I can remember my first hit like it was yesterday. I really enjoyed Frederick. I, again, have a great affinity for my hometown. Real great affinity. I had great teachers. And once I graduated from Frederick, I went to UW Eau Claire. And I didn't play baseball my first year. My dad really got mad at me. My dad really got mad at me, and he basically kind of bawled me out for not playing. And I said, well, I don't think I'm good enough. So I didn't go out. And my next year, I only went out really to shut my dad up. So I went out my next year, and I was fortunate enough to make the team at Eau Claire. And I got a chance to play for a guy by the name of Dan Langloss, who's from Durand. Very, very well-known family in Durand. One of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. When I made the team, and I started practicing with the team, he put me at second base, and he had said to me, he says, well, how long have you been playing second base? I said, I've never played second base. He said, what did you play in high school? I said, I just played shortstop. He says, well, you're going to learn how to play second base. And he was real important to me. I still communicate with him quite often. Dan Langloss from Durand, a really good guy. Here in Prescott, I was hired in 1989, 1990. Mr. Lehman hired me, and then Steve Block gave me the opportunity to coach. And when I graduated from Frederick, we had good high school baseball teams in Frederick, very good baseball teams. And had a good experience at UW Eau Claire. But when I came to Prescott and saw the type of program that Steve Block ran, it was unbelievable. I was like, this is a college program. The expectations that Coach Block has for his players are nothing like I experienced in high school. And I quickly realized the amount of time, the amount of effort that it takes to coach baseball at the high school level. And to be perfectly honest, when I was in high school, I always thought it appeared to be the easiest sport in the world to coach. But when I came here, that my mind changed very quickly. So again, I'm very fortunate that I was given the opportunity to not only teach in Prescott, but also coach in Prescott. I was an assistant coach with Steve for 9 years, and then had the opportunity to become a head coach. Before that, I resigned as head girls basketball coach, which I tell people, even though some people think that I'm being disingenuous when I say this, but I think Mr. Lehman knows this, that still remains the most difficult decision I've made since I've been teaching, was to decide to quit coaching girls basketball. I never envisioned it to be as difficult as it was. It was really tough to do that. But I did it, and I remember my first year, we won our first game and lost our next two. I'm like, we're 1-2, we're under 500. And there's a little bit of pressure when you follow a Hall of Fame coach like Steve Block. And you put a lot of pressure on yourself. But that pressure can be alleviated when you put a name like Nick Johnson in the starting lineup, or Nick Thone, or Eric Tobias, or Chris Terrazas, or Bill Brookshaw, or Peter Brookshaw, or Mike Brookshaw, or Gary Seifert, Ben Krings. You think of all the players, Dan Payne, all the players that have come out of Prescott. It's pretty easy to coach players like that. And I don't mean to be flippant when I say this. There's a lot of times where you just, you can become a pretty good coach when you put names like that in the lineup card. I've also had really loyal assistants. Brad Matzik started coaching in 1996, so that's well over 2 decades of coaching, and Dwayne Miller, 15 years. You have to have loyal assistants, because if you don't have that, things can fall apart very quickly. We certainly have our disagreements, and that's good. We need to have those, but without their help, it's not possible. You have to have administrative support. You have to have principals that back you. You have to have superintendents that do the same, and I've been fortunate to have that. Very fortunate to coach in this town. I will say this. It's a difficult job. I'm not looking for sympathy, but it's a tough job. In some ways, and I gotta be careful I say this, I've always told people that coaching is more difficult than teaching, because kind of how people sometimes skew what's important and what's not important. Baseball becomes the be-all, or athletics becomes the be-all, end-all for a lot of people. It's important, and believe me, I participated in high school, all sports. I was also in drama. I also was in forensics. I was also the editor of the school newspaper. So, it's important to be involved in a lot of things. That's one of the great things about a small community, have those opportunities. So, those are just a few things. I talked way too long. I apologize for rambling, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of an insight of who I am and what I'm about. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Probably not.
When do you get this? Have you gone to this?
No,
honor?
it's a week from Saturday.
And where is that?
In Madison, at the Marriott West in Madison. That'll be a neat thing. All my brothers will be there and their wives, and so.
What's the process, Jeff, for electing people to the Hall of Fame for the?
Okay, well, you have to have a lot of money to bribe committee. No, you have to be nominated by someone who's in the association, and once a person.
Like coaches?
Yep, anybody, yeah, coaches or, primarily coaches. You're nominated, and there are 6 regional committees. There's a group of, I think, 6 coaches in the 6 regional areas. What they do is they collect nominees from their regions, and they'll take people from their region, and then they'll send them to the state committee, and those recommendations are made, and they basically make the decision. And I was notified the morning of Thanksgiving, which is kind of a cool thing. But it was very, 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 very humbling to be named.
Are there others, baseball coaches going in, or is it just one?
Yeah, there's 3 others. There's 3 others. A good friend of mine, also a UW-Eau Claire graduate, a guy by the name of Bill Coker, Tom Davey from Deerfield, and Steve Warren from Marathon. So all 3 guys I know.
Well, I just want to tell you, as a parent of a daughter who played basketball with you as her coach, she still talks about that as being, how lucky she was to have a coach like you, and she appreciated that. And as a parent, we did too, because there's all kinds of coaches out there, and it was really nice to have you as a coach, because she loved basketball, and she really loved being on the Prescott basketball team, and went on to college and played successfully. And I think it was the groundwork that you all had provided her here in sports. So just thank you as a parent.
Well, she was among one of the best high school basketball players come out of Prescott. Had a great career at California Lutheran, and
and she still plays every Tuesday with a group of men, and she's the only woman. And the other day she said to me, I think, Mom, my knees are starting to hurt so much. She's now, getting older, and I said, well, what do you think, honey? You've been pounding those knees ever since you were about 10 years old, and what are you now, about 40? So that's a lot of pounding. Mm-hmm. And but she said, well, it was all worth it. I love basketball.
You must have a Steve Block story. He would be here today, but they just had a new grandbaby yesterday, so I think he's watching the other kids. But,
that's a story. What kind of story?
Maybe not.
No, I know that. That's why I asked what kind of a story. I think I remember in 1991 when Prescott. When the team lost a regional final game to Spring Valley in the regional final. And I remember there wasn't a lot of talking on the bus ride home, and I remember going into the coach's office, and Steve had a handful of keys, and he just threw them against the wall, and they just exploded, and the keys went all over the place. And I was like, holy, this is really serious. Just how intense he was, and always so intense, and there was a lot of things, the nuances of the game, the details of the game. He was a master of teaching that and talking about the importance of drill, and putting pressure on kids in practice. And he certainly was very adept at that. I mean, he's won a lot of games, and I guess I always was envious of that that meticulous attention to detail, and that always wanting to get better, always wanting to get better. And I also greatly appreciate his trust in me when I was an assistant coach. You know, and you always put pressure on yourself, and you always want to do as much as you can, do the best you can. You can always do more, and I think that's one of the things that you know, he just ingrained that. Just, you know, you always got to get better. You always got to get better. You can't just be satisfied with where you are. You've got to try to get better, try to get better, try to get better, and that's a great skill, regardless of what you do, whether you're talking about baseball or life or work or teaching or whatever. So there were a couple of conversations that he had with umpires that were always very interesting, and but no, he's a great coach and a good friend.
Anybody else have questions for Steve? I'm sure he'll stick around if you want to get that off record comments. But thank you for your time and congratulations.